Why hello there, Dragonfly Swarm. Xingqiu is broken, insane, disgustingly cracked, undoubtedly one of the strongest characters in the game. And you know something? With patch 3.0, he only got stronger. Not that that should be too surprising since he's been a staple meta pick for as long as most of us can remember, but with the many changes to Genshin's gameplay in 3.0, Xingqiu has benefited from quite a few indirect and direct buffs. So, in today's video, I'm gonna discuss everything you'll need to know in order to elevate your Xingqiu into one of the strongest characters on your account, from discussing the intricate details of his kit, to his powerful constellations, his best artifacts, weapons, and the flashy new teams he's gained access to as of 3.0. But before I do, I stream multiple days a week on Twitch, and if you haven't already, you should totally follow me and catch me live sometime. Alright, let's get into this guide first by looking at Xingqiu's utterly useless attack talent. I won't say utterly useless, because some people like to main DPS Xingqiu, but this guide is focused on his most powerful playstyles, being that of a sub DPS and support, so I'm not going to talk about his attack talent, because it would be pointless. Instead, Xingqiu's elemental skill is far from pointless. Casting his elemental skill will cause Xingqiu to swipe his sword in front of him twice for very large hydro damage, and upon casting this ability, he summons the maximum amount of rain swords to orbit your active character. At C0, he summons 3 swords. These rain swords are quite important to the supportive side of his kit because they grant a number of benefits to your active character. Firstly, whenever an enemy strikes your active character with these rain swords active, one of them is going to shatter, reducing the damage of that strike by a certain amount. It's important to note too that the damage reduction these rain swords grant to your character also scale with Xingqiu's hydro damage bonus, so that makes his 4th ascension passive quite enjoyable, not just for the extra damage, obviously, but also for the utility. Additionally, thanks to Xingqiu's 1st ascension passive, anytime a rain sword does shatter or expire, it will heal the active character for 6% of Xingqiu's max HP. And 2 other notes about these orbitals is that they also provide the active character with a bit of interruption resistance, and they apply hydro to enemies they touch once every 2.5 seconds roughly. So in general, Xingqiu's skill outputs very high damage and provides his team with a lot of survivability, but it's on a very long cooldown and it's his only form of self-energy circulation, and thus requires you to manage his rotations thoughtfully so that he always has his burst ready, because it is a very powerful ability. Casting Xingqiu's elemental burst will instantly summon the max amount of rain swords around your active character, which do have the exact same properties as the ones I mentioned from his elemental skill, except these ones can't be shattered, which basically just means your active character enjoys damage reduction and interruption resistance for the entirety of his burst. Additionally, when your active character performs a normal attack, Xingqiu's burst will simultaneously attack with a wave of hydro swords. Thus, he's applying hydro to enemies on almost every wave and dealing a very high amount of single target damage entirely from off the field. Obviously, this is one of the main reasons why Xingqiu is regarded as one of the best characters in the game, because his hydro application is second to none, and he's dealing a very high amount of personal damage while simultaneously enabling constant hydro-related reactions and providing utility to your active character. A lot of things at once. It is kind of important to note that although there are clearly 3 rain swords per wave, it actually only deals 2 instances of hydro damage one wave, 3 the next wave, then 2, then 3, 2, 3, alternating. And of course, as for talent priority, with a typical Xingqiu playstyle, you're gonna want to level his burst first and then his skill, and then the attack talent, again, ignore that shit. Alright, we're gonna move on to Xingqiu's constellations, which provide some very large power spikes, so they're very much worth discussing. At C1, Xingqiu can now provide 4 total rain swords at a time to his teammates instead of 3, meaning more healing and more survivability, which is nice for reinforcing his role as a support without sacrificing any of his DPS at all in doing so. Even still though, it is one of his weaker constellations, which should say something because it's not weak. Because for example, C2 is one of his most valuable constellations, and it allows for a large damage increase to Xingqiu and any other hydro DPS he's teamed with, and it extends the uptime on his burst for more total damage and hydro application. With this duration extension and the very rare hydro resistance shred, he's able to elevate his team damage contribution by quite a significant amount in any given rotation. At C3 though, this damage contribution spikes even higher thanks to the 3 extra levels this constellation will grant to his burst. It's a very valuable constellation for the damage spike, but that's about all there is to say about it. C4 is interesting because the constellation significantly increases Xingqiu's skill damage when casted while his burst is active, which is nice, but that's kind of all it does. It basically incentivizes that you use his skill during his burst, so if you're running Sack Sword, you'd perform his skill, then burst, then skill again, or if the situation allows, you can use his burst, then use both of his skills, but with any other weapon, just perform his burst first, then press his skill. C5 even further spikes the damage on his skill though, and with the help of C4, it gives his skill technically some of the highest scaling of any hydro user in the game, and the ability can vape, so yes, it can be used as a nuke if you want. And finally, C6 is kind of insane. This constellation is by far Xingqiu's best and is relatively complex to dissect. Every 3rd wave of Xingqiu's burst will now proc 5 instances of hydro damage instead of the typical 2 to 3, and when this special wave hits, Xingqiu regenerates 3 energy. This means he's generally able to restore around 18 energy for himself, cutting his total burst cost down by almost 25%, whilst also allowing him a much greater means of personal damage and improving his hydro application further. So, it's a very powerful constellation and his most notable power spike from all of these constellations. But in general, as much as Xingqiu is functional and powerful at C0, he is effectively a significantly stronger character at C6, so having constellations is more valuable for Xingqiu than it can be for other 4-stars. But with all of that aside, I want to discuss his artifact options now, because technically speaking, he has gained access to new sets. It's just, how good are they? Let's start by discussing his uncontested best in slot, the 4-piece Emblem set. So Emblem was a whirlwind of change back in 2.0, and a lot of characters with high energy demands quickly found this artifact set to be their strongest. Xingqiu is one of those characters. Despite what some people argue, this is mathematically his strongest set by a notable amount, and generally makes him far easier to work with anyways, since you'll have an easier time managing his energy threshold and will be rewarded with extra burst damage for doing so. All of these things are extremely valuable to Xingqiu, and the Emblem domain is resin efficient to farm for, so I would recommend this set as your end goal for almost every Xingqiu team. But there is also 4-piece Noblesse. Xingqiu will lose out on damage by running this set, since he'll have to focus his stats into ER, but he does enjoy the burst damage bonus, and the ability to buff his team's attack stat can prove valuable in some scenarios. So it's definitely a viable option, but it can still fall behind 4-piece Emblem quite fast in terms of team damage contribution. After those, you can run any combination of 2-piece Emblem, 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Heart of Depths, and 2-piece attack set, but technically speaking, the best combination is 2-piece Emblem, 2-piece Noblesse. Still though, you can't go wrong with any of these 2-piece combinations because they're all only marginally better or worse than each other, and substats can pull some ahead of others, it all depends. Personally, given the superiority of 4-piece Emblem, I would only run a 2-piece combo if the substats are absolutely god tier, or if it's a temporary solution while you farm for 4-piece Emblem, but that's just me. And regarding the Sumeru artifact sets, yes, Xingqiu can use them, but should he? 4-piece Gilded Dreams would be his go-to set in Bloom teams because it allows him to stack 230 elemental mastery for massive Bloom damage, but the problem is that Xingqiu applies Hydro extremely fast, and currently we don't have a Dendro unit that can consistently keep up with this Hydro application, so as of right now, I don't necessarily recommend this artifact set, but down the line it could become valuable on Xingqiu. It's just that he's also a large energy demon, so you'll have to worry about that on top of his elemental mastery. And finally, as for the 4-piece Deepwood set, duh, you can use it on Xingqiu, but why use it on him when you can use it on literally any other character? Ideally, you would be using this set on Xingqiu in teams like Hyperbloom, where he's quite a valuable Hydro enabler, because then he's enabling Bloom reactions and shredding Dendro resistance, so that enemies take more Hyperbloom damage. But other units can also use this set with full functionality, so there's no reason to use this on Xingqiu over other units unless you just happen to have the perfect substats to back your Xingqiu up. Anyways, with artifact main stats, Xingqiu very much enjoys the Hydro damage goblet, not just for his personal damage, but also for the damage resistance he provides to teammates. He also likes a crit circlet, keeping in mind the golden 1-to-2 ratio, and as for the sands, it's kinda complicated. So before C6, Xingqiu needs a lot of energy recharge, so you're more than likely gonna need to run an ER sands to reach his energy threshold, which is generally around 200 to 240% energy recharge. But since his C6 cuts his burst cost by roughly 18 energy, he has quite a bit less energy demand at C6, and thus only needs around 140 to 160% energy recharge. So if you can reach that threshold without an ER sands, boom, run an attack sands for the extra personal damage. With substats, very much focus your energy recharge first, as I just said, then you can shoot for crit stats, then attack percent, and then elemental mastery can be kind of useful depending on the team, but not at all ideal. And after that, other substats are just copium, and you should throw those artifacts away because you deserve better. I love that I said that, and then I'm about to ruin everybody's day with this weapon section. Xingqiu's weapons are kind of expensive. The thing is, some of his best 4-star weapons are gacha exclusive and really require refinements to be at their best, and his free-to-play weapon pull is kinda mid, but the good thing is that he's still strong without great weapons, just not as strong. Starting with the expensive options, Primordial Jade Cutter is technically Xingqiu's best in slot weapon if you can manage his energy well enough with it. That means that when your Xingqiu is at C6 and or you're running a suitable 4-piece emblem set, this weapon becomes significantly more valuable than his other options and allows him to output very high off-field damage. But that sentiment goes both ways. If you cannot fund his energy threshold adequately, this weapon will not outperform his other options, because losing burst uptime on Xingqiu is missing out on significant DPS, no matter what weapon you're using. Other powerful weapons include Mist Splitter, which is strong on Xingqiu, but still falls short of Jade Cutter since he can't actually fully utilize the weapon passive. Skyward Blade is also surprisingly solid on Xingqiu for the ER and crit rate that it provides, and he's actually one of the few characters that I would argue this weapon isn't totally irrelevant on, since he's able to capitalize on the ER, the crit, and the respectable weapon base attack. Finally, for 5 stars, Summit Shaper does exist, but it's only really good on your Xingqiu if you can get enough energy recharge and crit substats to warrant this weapon's high attack bonus. Elsewise, it's probably not going to provide as much value as his other options, one of which being the Sacrificial Sword, which is actually one of his best swords in terms of utility. Sacrificial Sword is a 4-star that you can't get for free, and it only becomes reliably functional with refinements. Actually, that's kind of a lie, because Xingqiu has 2 swipes of his skill, so he can proc it. He has 2 chances to proc it. But it is one of his best weapons since it allows him to cast his powerful elemental skill twice, not only granting him significantly more personal damage, but also allowing him to battery himself much more efficiently. Therefore, before C6 and in situations where you want to run an attack stance, this weapon is one of his strongest and provides Xingqiu with a lot of comfort and practicality that he otherwise wouldn't enjoy. On a relatively similar note, Favonia's Sword is also a great weapon for appeasing Xingqiu's energy needs, as it grants identical stats as Sac Sword, only the weapon passive focuses more on team-based energy regen rather than offensive personal energy regen, so I generally recommend Sac Sword over this weapon for Xingqiu, but it is still valid. Weirdly enough, Alley Flash can be quite good on Xingqiu if his energy needs are already met, and especially if you're running him as a bloom carry, but it's pretty situational, so I'm only bringing this weapon up to point out that it does work if you don't need energy-based weapons. And finally, if all of those options are avoiding you, it's probably not personal, don't worry. Amanome Kageuchi is gonna be your best bet. It provides a good amount of energy management with its unique weapon passive, and also provides Xingqiu with a nice boost to his personal damage, so you can run an ER stance for his energy threshold. Xingqiu does have access to the powerful new Sapwood Blade, which is a free-to-play craftable sword, and it's pretty good on Xingqiu, but he can only utilize it realistically when running in some form of bloom teams, and even then, the weapon forces him to focus less on his own damage in favor of sharing EM for his teammates' damage, so the value is only at its absolute strongest if your teammate is capable of outputting high reaction damage with that EM bonus. The problem is that he doesn't have any other notable weapons outside of this, because 3-star weapons lose significant value on him since he likes attack stats. So your best bet is to run Amanome Kageuchi until you can pull at least 1 copy of Sac Sword, or I guess any other weapon I mentioned. But in general, Xingqiu's ideal weapon options are kinda on a small list and are locked behind Wishing, but he's still functional even without these weapons so long as you're running enough energy recharge on him, because a Hydro Enabler will always be a Hydro Enabler, no matter how little damage they're dealing. Oh god, that sounded so copium. I beg of you, just pull a Sac Sword. Alright, we're moving into the most exciting part, team comping, and my god, does Xingqiu fit into a lot of teams. For the sake of simplicity, I'm gonna start by explaining the newer teams that he's been introduced to, as well as teams that benefit from the changes he's enjoyed, and then I'll skim over other teams as we go along, because with the changes to Hydro Resonance and the introduction of Bloom reactions, there is a lot of ground to cover. First and foremost, Dendro teams have given Hydro units yet another aspect of gameplay that I would assume will eventually become more enjoyable, because right now Bloom teams aren't too terribly strong, but that mostly has to do with our lack of powerful Dendro characters. So to start this off, let's discuss Xingqiu's viability in Bloom. As for regular Bloom and Fridge teams, Xingqiu, as I alluded to earlier, is unfortunately not amazing. He's functional, but far from optimal. Not only because he applies way too much Hydro too fast for our current Dendro characters to keep up with, but also because he doesn't heal all that much, and inside of Bloom teams, you really need a healer if you don't have a shield, so he's restricting the team's building options far more than someone like, for example, Kokumi would. Nonetheless, you can make him work in these teams with gear like 4-piece Gilded Dreams and teammates such as Dendro Traveler, Kole, and Animal Crowd Controller, and any Cryo Sub DPS. Hyperbloom teams, however, are a different story entirely. Xingqiu in Hyperbloom is very strong, most specifically with Kuki or Raiden, Dendro MC, and Beidou or Zhongli because of their tight synergy with one another, but there are quite a lot of variations of teammates you can shoot for to reach generally the same goal. In this team, the goal is to abuse the way Dendro application interacts with electrocharged enemies, wherein you can create more Bloom Seeds and therefore more Hyperbloom damage at a time. Xingqiu happens to work well here because his Hydro application doesn't cost as much reaction damage since Hyperblooms themselves can only damage enemies every so often, and that all dives into intricate mechanics on the Bloom reactions, but basically Xingqiu works very well with this team, and the team itself is actually one of the stronger teams that we've been introduced to as of 3.0. If you want to learn even more, this Hyperbloom team and its many intricacies were covered in depth by Zajef, who's an amazing theory crafter and guide maker, so that'll be linked below for more information on the technical aspect of this team and how it works. Finally, with Burgeon teams, Xingqiu isn't really the best in these teams, but in all fairness, Burgeon teams as of right now are very hard to work with, and there aren't a lot of options for team cores anyways. It's difficult to maintain the proper auras on enemies without causing the burning reaction, which is a detriment to your Burgeon reactions. So in general, I would steer away from these teams for now, but Xingqiu can function as the team's Bloom enabler with teammates such as Thoma, DMC, a second Hydro unit, a second Dendro unit, or an Animo unit. Moving on though, the other interesting thing about Xingqiu's teams in 3.0 is that he was always a really good unit to run in double or mono Hydro teams since he can shred Hydro resistance, but now that Hydro Resonance grants the team-wide HP bonus rather than increased healing, this synergy has become even stronger for his top Hydro allies. For example, pairing Xingqiu with Kokomi will now grant both of them more healing and will grant Kokomi more damage through the Hydro Resonance HP bonus, which is amazing for Kokomi Taser teams and mono Hydro Kokomi teams. Ayato enjoys these bonuses too, since he does enjoy HP scaling to some extent, but the big change here is with arguably one of Xingqiu's most powerful synergies, Yelan. Xingqiu and Yelan are a very strong duo to run as a core for a surprisingly large amount of teams, and now that Hydro Resonance grants the HP bonus, Xingqiu's presence not only grants Yelan more energy and Hydro resistance shred, but it also grants her a massive spike in her damage output, because most of her damage comes from her HP. So running Xingqiu and Yelan in teams like Double Hydro Hu Tao, Double Hydro Raiden, Mono Hydro, etc. will feel much more potent than it already was, especially in teams with other characters that already enjoy HP scaling, like Hu Tao in her own teams, and Bennett in Double Hydro national teams. In general, the Hydro Resonance change was a pretty significant buff to these areas of Xingqiu's team building. Finally, not much has changed with Xingqiu's other established synergies. He's always been an amazing unit for Pyro DPS units like Diluc, Yanfei, Yoimiya, etc., and that hasn't really changed, for better or for worse. He's also still a staple pick for many variations of the powerful national team because he's cheap to build and functions perfectly with the team's playstyle, and he's still very formidable all around for teams that need a Hydro enabler or a sub DPS, or both at the same time. So build your Xingqiu, because you deserve to. He deserves to be built. He's swag. Anyways, that about sums up my take on Xingqiu in 3.0. He's received a lot of new team building buffs and can even be technically slotted into new roles now, which is exciting to test out and mess around with, because who knows, maybe down the line a Dendro unit will come out that will allow him to fully run as a Bloom carry. But until then, you should probably leave a like on this video and subscribe if you want to, of course, no pressure. But there is pressure for you to join my Discord server, because if you're not already in it, you're missing out on a super cool community. Anyways, Xingqiu lovers unite. I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye. Goodbye.